Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. It's your host, Rising Oblivion. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about 6 things that I would like to see in Persona 6, or 6 things that Persona 6 needs. 6, obviously, being the 6th entry of Persona, so I figured 6 things would be good, but this list kind of can go subsequently with any releases that ATLUS does, at least in the mainline Megami Tensei turn-based games, but Persona 6 is what kind of gave me the idea to run this list, and this is something I've thought about doing for a long time. Seeing releases like Soul Hackers and SMT5, knowing that they had little bits and pieces that were missing, I've sort of collected here a list of 6 major things that I feel like Persona 6 would need, or like I said, subsequent releases from ATLUS and the mainline Megami Tensei turn-based games. Now, the order of this doesn't necessarily have any relevance, just 6 things, but they're all pretty major things I think something like Persona 6 or other releases would need to have. Let's go ahead and jump to number 1. Number 1 being the Reverse Compendium. If you guys have played SMT3 or any of the other Persona games or just older Mega 10 games, you know how it is when it comes to having to fuse demons and having to look up the demon fusion stuff on Google just to figure out how to make certain types of fusions, because it can be pretty hard. Or if you want to have a certain demon with a certain skill, it can take a very long time to figure all of that stuff out. I think having the Reverse Compendium from SMT5, but also having these search settings from SMT4 would be the perfect way to go about doing this, because you can look up specifically the types of demons that you want to have, but also know how to fuse them basically without ever having to look up giant lists on how to do this. If you played SMT3 all the way through, you know what I'm talking about. Persona 5 also, if you wanted to complete the compendium, you had to do certain things like this. I don't think it's genuinely possible to do everything without having to spend hours upon hours just kind of guessing based on fusions you did in the past how to do this. So I think the Reverse Compendium would make things a lot easier with fusing demons, and the demons or personas, depending on the series, is a huge part of the game, and understanding your playstyle and your build for your characters. That does a whole lot for terms of gameplay and making things better. Soul Hackers 2 had something similar to this. It wasn't the Reverse Compendium, but it did some things to help guide you and aid you. I think the reason why Soul Hackers 2 didn't have the Reverse Compendium from SMT5, you could argue they're different, games, but I think they were just developed too closely alongside each other, so it wasn't able to be implemented. Let's jump on over to number 2, and this comes to exploration. SMT5 showed us the first open world type of game. Strikers showed us a lot more of Japan, and I think this is an awesome route that they keep going with this. Even Soul Hackers 2 had a little bit of this more exploration when it came to running around to different places, having multiple different places to go to. Strikers does this so well. I'm not a super big fan of Strikers, but being able to see different places of Japan, and each of these different places of Japan have a different feel, and it kind of matches with the palaces that you're doing. Seeing the items and different types of demons that are also within these certain places is great. When you go to Hokkaido and it's snowy and there's Jack Frost running around, it just makes sense. It's kind of weird seeing Jack Frost to be somewhere that's really warm, or like a desert or something like that, you know what I mean? So sometimes it just kind of feels weird, but having these different environments all throughout Japan, instead of saying specifically stuck on something like Tokyo. Don't get me wrong, I love Tokyo. SMT3 is one of my favorites. Just being around that whole area the whole time, even in SMT3, I can do it. I absolutely love that, but being able to see more of Japan, having more of that exploration, it does so much for it. And obviously not having pre-generated, palaces or dungeons. We haven't seen that in a while, but you know what I mean when talking about P3, P4. A lot of people recently, jumping back, played those games and figured out the palaces, or I guess just dungeons or what they were called for those games, were procedurally generated. They were just generated, and the chests and all the items and everything like that were just generated. So it's more work to have something be done on a direct path. You're directly making all this stuff, but I think that gives you a better sense of exploration, because you found a place and you won't have to just randomly run around and find it again. Let's move on over to number 3. So this isn't something necessarily gameplay related, but I think when it comes to the well-being of the game itself, something like Persona 6 or another Mega 10 release, that is multi-platform, multi-international release. So we know that us hardcore fans, of course, are going to be getting it, even if it takes a year to be ported or something. ATLUS has been getting better at this, but I think it's just a good point to sort of redo and just talk about again. Having the games be a multi-platform, multi-international release gives us something more along the lines of what other JRPGs are doing. They're trying to push multiple markets all around the world, and I think that helps overall with the well-being of the game and makes sure for the game to not die out. So like I said, us hardcore fans, we're always keeping up to date, we're always knowing about this, but I think for the casual player and just for the well-being of the company and for the people involved, I think this gets more people on board when they realize it's a big event and it's happening all over, and it doesn't really matter what platform you're playing on. I understand Switch is a little bit harder if the games are going to be increasingly more and more demanding for the hardware. The Switch obviously isn't going to be something that's always viable, so I can understand if like something like that causes you not to be able to play it on that platform. And of course, Shin Megami Tensei has exclusivity stuff with Nintendo, so that makes sense. But for something like Persona 6, more directly related to how I got these ideas was, Persona 6 should be able to release everywhere. It's jumping to just about every platform. However, maybe Nintendo will have a better version of the Switch that maybe could deal with it if it's going to be graphically a little bit more intense for that kind of console that we currently have. Number 4, being better dialogue. So I know there is tons and tons of dialogue in P5. It just goes on for too long and every single character has to throw in their 2 cents. At least if the dialogue could be voiced more, that's at least a little bit better. But there is tons and tons of text in P5. P3 and P4 I think is where it shines. I think they have just the right amount of dialogue when it comes to text form and also just spoken form. All the good stuff and the meaty stuff that you actually need to care about is voiced. However, there are a lot of key moments that are not voiced in P5. More specifically when it comes to the confidants and having to talk to them. There are some bits that are just completely unvoiced, and I know it sucks to read. Some of us don't like to do it. I'd say a majority of fans actually get turned away from something like P5 because of the large amount of text. And I know you could just say, hey, stop being dumb, just read, it's not a big deal. And you might be right, but still, when it comes to more casual fans, people who just don't want to sit there and be constantly reading, I want to play the game, I want to be involved, I think it'd be worth it for them just to put that little bit of extra work on making the dialogue better and voicing what needs to be voiced. Again, I think P3 and P4 did such a good job with this. I'd argue SMT3 is pretty good with this as well. However, some more dialogue probably could have done that game a little bit better. But overall, still, P5 I think just goes way too much with the dialogue and way too much with the text dialogue. Moving on, number 5. And this is something that, I think a lot of people in the community have always wanted. Gender. Pick your gender when it comes to the game. They always seem to be adding certain things later that kind of feel like the opposite of that character or outfits or whatever, but P3 did this not perfectly, but allowed you to switch genders basically depending on which version of the game you get. Obviously, Portable came out years later. It didn't release on P3 right away, but being able to have a different gender choice would be nice. It seems like they're kind of going more on the route with like SMT5. I think that would be fine, where the gender of your character is a little ambiguous. However, they for sure have like pronouns. They for sure have like a gender, but just from first glance, you kind of can't tell, right? And a lot of people get kind of confused on what they are, and I think they're trying to do that intentionally. Like I'm saying, I think that's an intentional thing that they're kind of doing. We've been seeing that with JRPGs a lot in the past, because I think they want the protag obviously to be somewhat of a self-insert, so you can kind of be anybody non-binary, binary, whatever you want to be, and you can sort of insert yourself into that character. That's why most of the time they're kind of silent protagonists, right? Because they're somewhat of a self-insert, but at the same time, they're kind of not. I think just having a bit of customization would be good. It could be something simple as just changing the hair or changing the outfit of the character just a little bit. That might be all they need to do. But also being able to romance any of the characters, or at least having some options for somebody who might be of a opposite sexual preference. That would be a good idea. I think that'd be something that would make the games a little more inclusive. I'm not trying to go full force like woke or anything with it, but just to give some of the other people a chance to play this game and want to do that. And it seems like P4 and P5 have a lot of leaked stuff and a lot of stuff within its data to suggest things like that, to having a lot of the like same-sex romance options. If you look into it and check out some stuff I'm sure you could find on websites or whatever, they had plans to do that kind of thing. It's not a surprise. ATLUS infamously has been very inclusive when it comes to that stuff, having transgender characters and Catherine, and they don't rub it in people's faces. I think that's the best way to do it. Just casually have it in there. It's a normal thing. Just normalize it. Have it in there. I think that's the best route they could go, but being able to have that, I think, would be great. And number 6, the final thing I'm having here is no day one DLC, at least when it comes to story DLC. I don't mind some cosmetics. I kind of get it. A lot of JRPGs lately have been doing that. ATLUS, of course, is not opposed to that either. A lot of times they have some skins and some DLC stuff in terms of cosmetics, maybe some healing items and whatnot. I think all that's fine. I think if you're willing to pay a couple extra bucks for an outfit and maybe like some soundtrack stuff changes when you're in battle or something like that, I don't think that's a very big deal. But when it comes to story stuff, Soul Hackers 2 did this with a character that adds more to the story. It adds more details to the other characters and what is currently happening with the sort of crisis in Soul Hackers 2. And that's pretty crazy to me, because you know for sure along development, if it's day one DLC, they had this stuff ready to go by the time the game released, and they intentionally chose to withhold that and keep that out of the game intentionally. Same thing with SMT5 when it came to the Demi-Fiend stuff. I think that would have been really cool to have that be in there. Day one DLC always turns the mass of the people away, and having to spend 60, 70 bucks on a game just to know that there's a $10 DLC with extra story just right there means you're gonna have to spend $90 to actually get the full experience. You could just choose to not opt in to do that stuff, but if you really want to love the game, and if you're a big mega fan like us, you end up having to buy the DLC, because something like the Demi-Fiend DLC in SMT5, it's like something I couldn't pass up. It's one of my favorite characters. So having that have to be day one DLC just really turned me the wrong way, because it seems like ATLUS in a lot of ways with their games, they kind of don't do that. They leave the cosmetic stuff to be there, but something like P5, it's a full game. You're getting 100 hours worth of just pure game and so much stuff to do. And the fact that SMT5 felt like it was lacking in some areas of story and depth and gameplay, the fact that they had day one DLC, same thing with Soul Hackers 2, it felt like it was missing some stuff. The fact that they had story DLC locked up in day one, it just really shows that they were willing to have those games not be completely finished or not be completely like idealized and ready to go, but they were willing to have some day one DLC that could potentially help those main game problems. They were willing to make you have to pay extra for the game that wasn't quite ready to go yet, which I think turns us off in a lot of ways as a player, and especially big fans like us who have been following their games for a very long time. But I think that's gonna be it for this video. Again, this is more for Persona 6, but I think this could apply to a lot of ATLUS's titles in general. Again, more of the JRPG, Mega 10 type stuff, but I wanted to get this video out and talk a little bit about this. These are a series of games I love, and it seems like a lot of people are kind of questioning where Persona 6 is. I think it's in development, obviously. They're working on that, the success of P5. I really doubt that they're not working on it. They're probably, doing something, at least storyboarding or something like that, getting those things along. But let me know, is there certain things that you would like to see in Persona 6 or other releases when it comes to ATLUS? Let me know down in the comments section below. Like, comment, subscribe for more content. As always, I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you all so much for watching.